Love is not something you earn. It's something that's recognized by someone mature enough to truly see it. Think not. Why do they only realize your worth after you stop trying? You loved with everything you had. You gave piece by piece of yourself to prove that you were enough. Enough to stay, enough to be chosen, enough to be loved right. You held on because you believed if you just loved them well enough, they would see you gave more than you had: time, energy, forgiveness. You told yourself, one day they'll get it. But the truth hits hard. They only begin to see your value when you stop chasing, when you stop justifying, when you stop anxiously responding to every withdrawal, when you stop bending to hold on to them and start holding on to yourself. They begin to see you as different. But that difference doesn't come from trying harder to be noticed. It comes from the quiet power of someone who no longer needs to be chosen to feel worthy. And the paradox is, they finally see your worth the moment you no longer need them to. Dismissive avoidants don't lack the need for connection. They fear the consequences of it. They aren't heartless or cold. They are simply people who learned very early on that closeness comes with a price: control, pressure, or the erasure of their autonomy. So their nervous system becomes wired for distance. To you, a loving gesture feels like bonding. To them, it's a quiet threat to their emotional independence. The more you need them, the more they fear being needed. The more you try to prove your worth, the more they feel the pressure to perform, to commit, to give something they're not ready to give. But here's the paradox. When you stop, everything shifts. When you stop texting, stop over-explaining, stop showing up as their emotional support system, you interrupt the codependent rhythm that made you invisible. Suddenly, their emotional system hits a void. At first, they feel relief. Finally, no more pressure. But what follows is emptiness. Why do I feel something's missing? That's when they begin to recognize your presence by your absence. They don't realize your worth because you disappear. They realize your worth because there's no longer someone regulating what they've never learned to self-regulate. You weren't just a romantic partner. You were their emotional buffer. You carried the emotional labor they refused to face. You gave without asking, soothed without demanding, waited without resenting. But they couldn't see it because avoidance doesn't process value through closeness. They process it through space. They can only appreciate what they're no longer suffocating from. It's not fair, but it's real. And it doesn't mean you should wait. Because if your entire sense of value is still hinged on being noticed after you leave, then you're still handing over your worth to a broken system. Your job is not to make them see your value. Your job is to remember you've always had it, even if they never do. Dismissive avoidants aren't just afraid of intimacy, they're afraid of being needed. They struggle to distinguish between healthy connection and relationships that come with demands. In their mind, closeness is always tangled with responsibility, pressure, and the looming threat of being emotionally swallowed. So every time you send a check-in text, every time you try to make peace, every time you go out of your way to show how much you love them, in the avoidant nervous system, you're not expressing love, you're signaling need. And they read the signal as, I'm the center of your emotional universe. And that terrifies them. They don't pull away because they hate you. They pull away because each attempt to get closer activates their survival brain. The more you try to prove your love, the more pressure they feel. The more you give, the more they fear they'll have to give back. And they haven't built the tools to do that without losing their autonomy. So they retreat. It's all they know how to do. You may believe that if you're just good enough, loving enough, selfless enough, they'll finally see your worth. But in the avoidance world, the more you try to prove your love, the less visible your value becomes. They don't see the gift. They see the threat of being emotionally engulfed. So what you need is a breakthrough. And it begins inside you, not a strategy to stop them from leaving, but a truth to awaken. You don't need to prove anything. Your worth isn't held in their eyes. It's held in how you treat yourself. When you stop worrying about what they think and start deeply loving yourself, you do what they can't. You choose you, and paradoxically, that's when the avoidance starts turning back. Not because they suddenly had a romantic epiphany, but because you no longer radiate, "I need you to feel valuable." You're not chasing. You're not explaining. You're not performing to be seen. You are no longer the one begging to be chosen. You are now the one standing in your worth. And that shifts everything. Not just in the relationship, but inside you. This is one of the most painful yet most liberating paradoxes in loving a dismissive avoidant. They only truly see you when you stop abandoning yourself in order to be seen. When you're in chase mode, you're not just chasing them, you're also running away from yourself. Every time you stay silent to keep the peace, every time you overextend to prove your worth, every time you bend over backwards just to be enough, what you're really telling yourself is, "My feelings don't matter. I am not complete without their approval." And that does more than destroy your self-esteem. It also makes you invisible to the avoidant, because in their eyes, you're not standing in your truth, you're reacting to theirs. You don't have boundaries. You don't have a sense of self. You don't have emotional sovereignty. You dissolve into their needs. And that, in the avoidant nervous system, doesn't create attraction. It creates retreat. Dismissive avoidants don't actually hate closeness. They hate the loss of control in a relationship. When you constantly shapeshift to fit their emotional limitations, staying quiet when they withdraw, being soft when they're cold, tolerating when they neglect, you think you're loving them, but in their world, you're intruding on their carefully protected emotional space. You send the message that you will collapse into their world at any time, and that suffocates them. Then one day, you stop. Not out of resentment, but out of return to yourself. You stop being silent to keep them. You start being silent to hear you. You no longer make peace for the sake of connection. You protect your peace from the things that caused your pain. You don't chase them, you choose yourself. And in that moment, what they once took for granted, your presence, your sacrifice, your unconditional giving, suddenly becomes rare. There's no longer someone to offer emotional comfort without accountability, no one left to regulate their pain for them, no one to love them more than you once loved yourself. And suddenly, they notice you. Not because you begged to be seen, but because you stopped abandoning yourself just to be heard. You now have boundaries, you have a voice, you have standards, and you live by them. You're not yelling, not manipulating, not proving. You simply exist in alignment with your worth. And when that happens, they feel strange. For the first time, they have to look up, not down. They start to ask themselves, why doesn't she need me anymore? Why am I no longer the center of her world? Why do I feel lost now when I used to feel suffocated? And the answer is simple, because you no longer abandon yourself to stay with someone who won't stay for you. That's what changes everything. Not strategy, not silent treatments, not manipulation, but the deep embodiment of someone who chooses themselves not to be chosen. You may still love them, but you no longer love them at the cost of yourself. You no longer turn your heart into an application for approval. You've returned to your own inherent worth, and you live from that place now. No one tells you this when you first fall for a dismissive avoidant. You're not just falling for them, you're slowly walking away from yourself. Piece by piece, your needs get ignored, your boundaries blurred, your emotions silenced, all in an attempt to preserve a connection that your soul already knows isn't safe. Every act that looks like love, keeping quiet, accepting crumbs, avoiding hard questions, is often just self-rejection in disguise. You try to be soft, patient, and easy to love, because deep down you fear that if you show up as your full self, they'll leave. And you confuse it. You think they're leaving because you're not enough, when in truth they could never fully stay, because you never fully stayed with yourself. The heart of healing isn't getting them back. The heart of healing is getting yourself back, the version of you that you abandoned just to be acceptable. And the deeper question becomes, who am I when I'm no longer trying to become someone in someone else's eyes? Rebuilding your sense of self isn't a luxury, it's survival so that you never again find yourself begging for love, giving as a way to earn affection, or loving from a place of fear. A person without a strong identity will always rely on others to reflect their worth back to them. So where do you begin? First, with radical honesty. Ask yourself, when did I stay silent to keep the peace? When did I say it's okay when I was breaking inside? What parts of myself did I sacrifice just to keep someone from walking away? You can't rebuild yourself without first facing the places where you betrayed yourself. Then anchor into the 3 pillars of personal identity. Core values, what do you stand for? Integrity, loyalty, emotional safety. Write them down. If you don't know your values, others will easily overwrite them with theirs. Emotional needs. What do you need in a relationship to feel seen, supported, and safe? Consistent communication, presence, kindness. Your needs don't make you needy. Naming and honoring them is an act of courage and self-respect. Boundaries. Boundaries are not walls. They are doors you control. What will you no longer tolerate? Silent treatments, unkept promises, half-hearted connection. Don't fear being called difficult when you speak up, because every time you don't enforce a boundary, you teach others that you don't deserve protection. Then comes the practice. Practice saying no when you mean it. Practice stopping when you feel yourself disappearing inside a relationship. Practice loving yourself even when no one else is doing it for you. Rebuilding your identity isn't about proving anything to anyone. It's about no longer needing to prove it all. It's about ending the search for external validation and learning to live as if you are already the light you've been chasing. Don't wait for someone to see you before you decide to see yourself. Don't wait to be chosen to finally choose you. Live as though you are already the one you've been waiting for, because when you do, that is the kind of love that never leaves. There is a quiet kind of maturity you only reach when no one is clapping for you, no one is validating you, and you still keep going because you know you're worthy. This path isn't meant for those waiting for applause from the outside world. It's for those who have sat in silence alone at night with a broken heart and still told themselves, I don't need to be seen to know I have value. We grow up in a world where our worth is often measured through someone else's eyes. You're chosen, you're kept, you're texted back, and early on, we learn to define ourselves through someone's presence or absence. But that is the greatest distortion created by anxious or avoidant attachment. You are not only worthy when you're loved, you've been worthy all along, even in your abandonment. And then comes the turning point, when you stop trying to become the version of you that someone else might love, when you stop shrinking yourself to fit into a space they never made big enough for you, when you stop waiting for someone to finally recognize that you were there for them every time, every message, every soft hope. Instead, you start choosing daily to look in the mirror without editing yourself through someone else's expectations, to do what's right for your soul even when no one applauds, to comfort yourself when you're tired instead of reaching out hoping for attention, to stop needing someone to say, you're enough, because you've stopped needing permission to believe it. That is the most sacred homecoming, to return to yourself with no conditions. To value yourself doesn't mean you never hurt. It means you no longer let hurt define who you are. The person who once made you feel small may never change. The person who left when you were at your most vulnerable may never come back. But that no longer matters because you've stopped using them as a mirror to reflect your worth. You become your own mirror now. And in it, you finally begin to see someone who survived more than anyone knows. Someone who dared to love, fully, lose, break, and rise again. Someone who deserves a love that doesn't ask them to trade their identity for connection. And that's when their absence no longer feels like a loss. It becomes space for you to fully show up for yourself. Real love begins the moment you stop needing to be chosen because you've already chosen you, not out of desperation, but from a grounded, unshakable truth. I am enough. I've always been enough, and I no longer need anyone's permission to live like it. Once you begin to truly value yourself, something strange happens. You stop acting just to be accepted. You begin to live as though you already are. This is one of the most powerful transformations in healing. The moment you stop letting the fear of rejection lead every word, every action, every decision in love. Most people don't realize that much of their behavior in relationships doesn't come from love, but from the fear of being left. You send the first text because you're afraid they'll forget you. You stay silent when hurt because you don't want to upset them. You say yes to what you don't want, just so you won't be seen as too much. These are the actions of a wounded inner child, one who learned, if I show my full self, I will be left behind. And how cruel it is to live that way, constantly adjusting yourself, walking on eggshells, anticipating others' reactions to feel safe. You become a version of yourself designed to be loved, not a version you've consciously chosen. The more afraid you are of being rejected, the further you drift from yourself, the more you avoid confrontation, the more you silence the parts of your soul that most need your voice. And the tragedy is the fear of being left causes you to abandon yourself first. Now is the time to stop. Stop texting to keep the connection when you're already emotionally depleted. Stop trying to be sweet, light, and agreeable when your heart is silently screaming to be heard. Stop living to be chosen and start living as though you already chose yourself. The truth is, rejection is a part of life. Some people will not see you, not understand you, not be mature enough to hold you. That is not evidence that you're not good enough. It's just proof they don't have the capacity to hold you as you truly are. You no longer need love to feel worthy. You need you standing firmly with yourself, even when the world walks away. You need to learn to say no, not because you don't love others, but because you finally learned to love yourself more. External rejection will always sting, but it's internal rejection that slowly destroys you. And here's the miracle. When you stop acting out of fear of abandonment, you begin acting from a place of freedom. You speak the truth without fearing disapproval. You set boundaries without guilt. You walk away not because you stopped loving them, but because you finally started loving yourself more than the fear of losing them. This is the moment when you stop being a victim of others' reactions and become the guardian of your own emotional response. And from here on out, you no longer live to please. You live to be honest with your soul. You may have once believed that if they came back, everything would be healed. But now you understand the one who needed to return was never them. It was you returning to yourself, to a worth that's no longer tied to someone else's gaze, to an inner voice you once silenced, now finally heard, to a heart you gave away in hopes of being seen, now being held gently by you unconditionally. You no longer wait to be recognized because you've already recognized yourself. You no longer fight to keep someone from leaving because you finally embraced the most fragile parts of your soul and whispered, I won't abandon you again. True healing doesn't begin when someone else loves you back. It begins the moment you stop running toward others and start walking back toward the wounded child inside you, the one who once believed they were not enough, not worthy, not chosen. You deserve a love that doesn't require chasing, a relationship that doesn't ask you to shrink, a presence that doesn't come with conditions, and that kind of love must first come from you. As Carl Jung once said, he who looks outside dreams, he who looks inside awakens, and you are awake now, no longer begging to be loved, no longer living in fear of rejection, but finally standing with the one person who will never leave you again, yourself.